The snow fell in thick, lazy flakes outside the window of Marcus Chen's small apartment, each one catching the amber glow of the streetlights below. Christmas Eve had always been his favorite night of the year, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy coat he couldn't take off. At 26, Marcus had never imagined he'd be spending Christmas Eve alone with his 4-year-old daughter, Emma. The divorce had been finalized just 3 months ago, and Sarah had moved across the country for a new job, leaving him to navigate single parenthood. In a city that suddenly felt too big and too expensive, Emma sat cross-legged on their second-hand couch, her dark curls bouncing as she colored in a Christmas coloring book with crayons worn down to nubs. The tree in the corner was modest, a small Fraser fir he'd gotten from the discount lot, but Emma had decorated it with the enthusiasm only a child could muster. Paper snowflakes hung from crooked branches alongside a handful of ornaments they'd managed to keep from the divorce settlement. "Daddy, when is Santa coming?" Emma asked without looking up from her coloring, her small tongue poking out in concentration. Marcus glanced at the meager pile of gifts beneath the tree. He'd worked double shifts at the warehouse for weeks to afford even those few presents, and he still wasn't sure how he was going to make rent next month. The guilt gnawed at him. Other kids would wake up to mountains of gifts, while Emma would find a used bike from the thrift store, some books from the library sale, and a stuffed unicorn he'd sewn a small tear in himself. "Soon, sweetheart," he said, forcing a smile. "But first, we need to take out the trash. It's pickup day tomorrow, remember?" Emma nodded solemnly. Even at 4, she understood that they had to be careful about everything, every dollar, every decision, every day. It broke Marcus's heart how quickly she'd adapted to their new reality. He bundled up the kitchen trash and the recycling, Emma trailing behind him in her pink pajamas and tiny boots. The hallway of their apartment building was dimly lit, smelling faintly of cooking spices and old carpet. As they made their way to the dumpster area behind the building, Marcus noticed how quiet the neighborhood was. Most families were probably tucked inside, warm and together, preparing for Christmas morning. The alley behind their building was narrow and poorly lit, flanked by the backsides of several apartment complexes and a small row of shops. The dumpsters stood like metal sentinels against the brick wall, overflowing with the detritus of holiday preparations. Wrapping paper, empty boxes, and the remnants of Christmas parties. As Marcus lifted the heavy lid of the dumpster, he heard a sound that made him freeze. It was soft, almost imperceptible over the whistle of the wind through the alley, but unmistakably human. A quiet whimper, like a small animal in distress. "Daddy?" Emma tugged on his coat. "What's that noise?" Marcus set down the trash bags and listened intently. There it was again, a soft sobbing sound coming from behind the dumpster next to theirs. He motioned for Emma to stay close as he cautiously approached the source of the sound. What he found made his heart stop. Huddled between 2 large garbage bins, partially hidden by a torn piece of cardboard, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, wearing a thin dress that might have once been white but was now stained with dirt and food. Her small hands were digging through a torn garbage bag, pulling out what looked like half-eaten sandwiches and checking them carefully before taking tiny, desperate bites. Her hair was matted and tangled, hanging in dark strands around a face that was gaunt with hunger, but it was her eyes that hit Marcus like a physical blow. Large, dark eyes that held a weariness no child should ever know, darting nervously around the alley like a frightened animal ready to bolt. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered, dropping to one knee. The little girl looked up at him with terror, clutching a piece of bread crust to her chest. "Please don't call them," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "I'll move. I'll go somewhere else." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Sweetheart, what's your name? Where are your parents?" The girl's eyes darted between Marcus and Emma, who was peering out from behind her father's legs with wide, curious eyes. "I'm Lily," she said finally. I don't have parents anymore." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked gently, trying to keep his voice calm, despite the rage and heartbreak building in his chest. Lily's story came out in fragments, between shivering fits and careful glances toward the alley entrance. Her mother had died 6 months. "Ego cancer," she said, though Marcus suspected she didn't fully understand what that meant. She'd been living with her mother's boyfriend, Danny, but he'd started bringing around scary men who yelled a lot and made the apartment smell funny. 2 weeks ago, Danny had told her he was going out for cigarettes and never came back. When the landlord came to evict them, Lily had hidden in a closet until everyone left, then slipped out through a window. She'd been living on the streets ever since, moving from alley to alley, dumpster to dumpster, surviving on whatever scraps she could find. "The other kids at the shelter were mean," she explained, her small voice trembling. "And the man there, he looked at me funny, made me feel scared, so I left." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He'd heard stories about overcrowded shelters, about children falling through the cracks of an overburdened system, but seeing this tiny girl reduced to digging through garbage on Christmas Eve, made it real in a way that statistics never could. Emma stepped forward, her 4-year-old instincts overriding any adult sense of caution. "Are you hungry?" she asked Lily. "My daddy makes really good mac and cheese." Lily's eyes went wide, and for the first time, Marcus saw something other than fear cross her face. Hope, fragile and tentative, but unmistakably there. "Emma's right," Marcus said, making a decision that felt as natural as breathing. "Would you like to come upstairs with us, just to get warm and have something to eat?" Lily looked between them, then at the garbage bag she'd been searching through. "You won't call the police?" "Not unless you want me to," Marcus promised. "Right now, let's just get you inside where it's warm." The walk back to their apartment felt surreal. Marcus carried the forgotten trash bags while Emma chatted excitedly to Lily about their Christmas tree and how Santa was coming tonight. Lily walked silently between them, her thin frame shaking with cold and exhaustion. In the elevator, Marcus caught a glimpse of their reflection in the polished doors. They looked like a family, a thought that surprised him with its intensity. Emma was holding Lily's hand, pointing out the buttons on the elevator panel, while Lily stared in wonder at the warm, well-lit space. Once inside their apartment, Marcus went into full father mode. He ran a warm bath, while Emma donated a pair of her own pajamas, pink with purple butterflies, which made Lily smile for the first time. While Lily bathed, Marcus called his neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman who had become something of a grandmother figure to Emma. "Marcus, mijo," she said, when he explained the situation in rapid, whispered Spanish. "Of course you did the right thing. That poor baby. You bring her to me tomorrow if you need help with anything, okay? And I have some of my granddaughters." Oh, clothes she outgrew. When Lily emerged from the bathroom, clean and wearing Emma's pajamas, she looked like a different child. Her dark hair, no longer matted with dirt, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She was painfully thin, Marcus noticed, her small frame swimming in Emma's clothes, but her eyes had lost some of their hunted quality. "Daddy, can Lily sit next?" "To me?" Emma asked as Marcus prepared bowls of the promised mac and cheese. "Of course, sweetheart." Watching Lily eat was both heartbreaking and hopeful. She took small, careful bites at first, as if afraid the food might disappear, then, gradually, relaxed as she realized no one was going to take it away. Emma kept up a steady stream of chatter about Christmas, about Santa, about their cat who had died last year, but who Emma insisted was now helping Santa in the North Pole. After dinner, the three of them sat on the couch. Emma had insisted on showing Lily all her coloring books, and now both girls were sprawled on the floor, creating masterpieces with the stub crayons. Marcus watched them, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. "Lily," he said gently, "can you tell me more about your situation? Is there anyone, any family members, who might be looking for you?" Lily shook her head without looking up from her coloring. "Mama said my daddy was a bad man who went away before I was born, and Grandma died when I was little. There's nobody." The simple, matter-of-fact way she said it hit Marcus harder than tears would have. This child had accepted that she was completely alone in the world. At 6 years old, with a resignation that no child should ever have to develop. "Well," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion he was trying to keep under control, "you're not alone tonight. Tonight, you're here with us." Emma looked up from her coloring. "Can Lily help me leave cookies for Santa?" "I think that's a wonderful idea," Marcus said. They spent the next hour in the kitchen, the girls working together to arrange store-brand cookies on a plate and pour milk into Emma's special Christmas cup, a plastic mug with reindeer on it that Sarah had bought 2 years ago. Lily approached, each task with serious concentration, as if afraid of making a mistake, while Emma provided running commentary on Santa's preferences. "He likes chocolate chip best," Emma explained with authority. "But he'll eat sugar cookies too if they have sprinkles, and you have to leave carrots for the reindeer. But we don't have any, so maybe Santa will share his cookies." As the evening wore on, Marcus found himself studying Lily, the careful way she moved, the way she flinched slightly when he moved too quickly, the way she watched the door as if expecting someone to come through it at any moment. This was a child who had learned too young that the world was not a safe place, that adults could not be trusted, that survival meant being constantly alert. But he also saw the way she smiled when Emma made a silly joke, the way she carefully helped clean up their coloring supplies, the way she said thank you after everything, even for being allowed to use the bathroom. There was an innate sweetness to her, a resilience that had somehow survived everything she'd been through. When it came time for bed, Emma made an executive decision. "Lily should sleep in my room," she announced, "in case she gets scared." Marcus looked at Lily, who nodded shyly. "Is that okay with you?" he asked her. "Yes, please," she whispered. He set up a makeshift bed on the floor next to Emma's twin bed, extra blankets and a pillow from the couch. As he tucked both girls in, Emma reached down from her bed to hold Lily's hand. "Don't be scared," Emma said seriously. "My daddy is really good at keeping bad things away, and tomorrow is Christmas, so everything will be better." Marcus felt his eyes burn as he turned off the lights. In the doorway he paused, watching the two small forms in the darkness. His daughter, safe and loved despite their struggles, and this little girl who had been forgotten by everyone who should have protected her. He spent the next several hours on the phone. First, he called the non-emergency police line to report finding Lily, explaining that she was safe, but that he needed to know the proper procedures. The officer was kind but firm. They'd need to involve Child Protective Services in the morning, though given that it was Christmas Eve, nothing would happen until the day after Christmas, at the earliest. Then he called his sister in Portland, waking her up despite the late hour. "Marcus, what's wrong? Is Emma okay?" He found himself crying as he told her the story, the weight of the day finally catching up with him. Jessica listened without interruption, occasionally making soft sounds of sympathy and outrage. "What are you going to do?" she asked when he finished. "I don't know," he admitted. "I can't let her go back into the system. Did you know that kids age out of foster care with almost no support? That the statistics for homeless youth who were in foster care are—" "Marcus," Jessica interrupted gently, "I can hear what you're thinking. Are you considering—" "I don't know if I can afford it," he said quietly, looking toward the girls' room. "I can barely afford Emma and me. But Jess, you should see her. She's been surviving on garbage for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And she's 6 years old." "Money isn't everything," Jessica said. You're a good father, Marcus. If anyone can handle this, it's you, and maybe this is meant to be. Maybe you found each other for a reason. After hanging up with his sister, Marcus sat in his small living room, looking at the modest Christmas tree and the few presents underneath. Tomorrow, Emma would wake up excited about Christmas. But what about Lily? What did Christmas mean to a child who had nothing? He thought about his own childhood, about waking up on Christmas morning to find the living room transformed into a wonderland of gifts and possibilities. His parents hadn't been wealthy, but they'd made sure he and Jessica felt loved, felt special, felt like they mattered to someone. When had Lily last felt like she mattered to anyone? Marcus made another decision, one that would have consequences. He couldn't fully foresee, but felt right in his bones. He put on his coat and boots and slipped out of the apartment, leaving a note on the kitchen table just in case the girls woke up. The 24-hour pharmacy across town was still open, its fluorescent lights harsh against the falling snow. Marcus walked through the aisles like a man on a mission, filling a cart with things he couldn't really afford but couldn't bear not to buy. A winter coat in what he guessed was Lily's size, warm socks and undergarments, a few simple toys. Nothing expensive, but new, meant specifically for her. The cashier, a tired-looking young woman with kind eyes, rang up his purchases without comment. But as he was leaving, she called after him. "Merry Christmas," she said. "Whatever you're doing, I hope it works out." Back at home, Marcus spent the early hours of Christmas morning wrapping Lily's gifts in leftover paper from Emma's presents. His wrapping skills had never been great, but he did his best, writing "For Lily" on each tag in his careful handwriting. As the sun began to rise, painting the snow-covered city in shades of pink and gold, Marcus finally allowed himself to sleep. Curled up on the couch with the sound of soft breathing coming from the girls' room, he woke to the sound of excited whispers. "Daddy! Daddy, wake up! Santa came!" Emma's voice was filled with the pure joy that only Christmas morning could bring. Marcus sat up, rubbing his eyes to find both girls standing by the couch in their pajamas. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement, but Lily stood quietly beside her, eyes wide with wonder as she stared at the tree. "Look, Daddy!" Emma pointed toward the tree. "There are presents for Lily, too. Santa knew she was here." Lily's face was a picture of amazement and disbelief. She approached the tree slowly, as if afraid the presents might disappear if she moved too quickly. When she saw her name written on the tags, her small hands went to her mouth. "For me?" she whispered. "For you," Marcus confirmed, his throat tight with emotion. What followed was perhaps the most beautiful Christmas morning Marcus had ever experienced. Emma opened her gifts with her usual enthusiasm, exclaiming over each one as if it were the most wonderful thing she'd ever seen. But it was Lily's reactions that brought tears to his eyes. She opened each present with careful reverence, smoothing out the wrapping paper and folding it neatly before examining her gift. The winter coat made her gasp. It was purple, her favorite color, she told them shyly. The socks and underwear, practical gifts that most children would find boring, were received with the gratitude of a child who had learned not to take basic necessities for granted. But it was the last gift, a simple stuffed elephant with soft, gray fur that broke down her carefully maintained composure. She held it to her chest and cried, not the desperate, frightened tears she'd shed in the alley, but the cleansing tears of a child who had been given something purely for the joy of giving. "Thank you," she whispered to Marcus. "Thank you so much." "You don't have to thank me," Marcus said, kneeling beside her. "Everyone deserves Christmas." Emma, with the unself-conscious generosity of childhood, immediately began planning how she and Lily could share all of her toys. "You can have half of my crayons," she announced, "and we can take turns with the good ones that aren't broken." They spent the morning playing together, the small apartment filled with laughter and the rustle of wrapping paper. Marcus made pancakes, a Christmas tradition he'd started when Emma was a toddler, and watched as Lily ate with the slow appreciation of someone who had recently known hunger. Around noon, reality began to intrude. Marcus knew he would need to call Child Protective Services soon, that he couldn't simply keep Lily without going through proper channels. But every time he looked at her, sitting on the floor with Emma, building elaborate structures with blocks, he found it harder to imagine letting her go. "Daddy," Emma said during lunch, "is Lily going to stay with us?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lily looked up from her sandwich, her eyes guarded again, the wariness creeping back into her expression. Marcus started, then stopped. How do you explain to a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old that the world is complicated, that wanting something to happen isn't enough to make it so? "I'm going to try," he said finally. "I'm going to try to make it so Lily can stay with us if that's what she wants. But there are grown-up things that have to happen first, people who have to make sure it's okay." Lily's grip tightened on her stuffed elephant. "What if they say no? What if they make me go back to the streets?" "That's not going to happen," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. "No matter what, you're not going back to the streets, I promise." That afternoon, while the girls napped together in Emma's room, Lily, finally looking peaceful in sleep, her new elephant clutched in her arms, Marcus made the calls he'd been dreading. The CPS worker who answered was professional, but overworked, her voice carrying the weariness of someone who dealt with too many tragic situations and not enough resources. Yes, she would need to come out to assess the situation. Yes, Lily could stay with Marcus temporarily while they investigated her case. But no, there were no guarantees about what would happen long term. "Mr. Chen," she said, "I appreciate what you've done for this child, but fostering, and especially adoption, involves extensive background checks, home studies, financial assessments. The process can take months, or even years." "I understand," Marcus said. I can't let her go back to having nothing. She's been through enough." "I'll be honest with you," the social worker continued. "The fact that you have a stable job and have been successfully parenting your daughter is a good start. But single fathers, especially young ones, face additional scrutiny. The system tends to favor traditional family structures." Marcus felt a familiar surge of anger at a world that seemed designed to punish people for circumstances beyond their control. "What can I do to improve my chances?" "Document everything. Keep records of Lily's progress, her health, her emotional state. Show that you can provide stability, and consider getting legal representation. The process is complex, and having an advocate can make a significant difference." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his quiet living room, looking at the Christmas tree that now seemed to symbolize something more than just a holiday. It represented hope, the possibility of a family he had never planned, but suddenly couldn't imagine living without. When the girls woke up, they spent the rest of Christmas Day doing simple things: watching a Christmas movie, making paper angels, playing board games that Emma modified so that Lily could understand the rules. Marcus observed how naturally the two children interacted, how Emma's protective instincts had kicked in, how Lily seemed to blossom under the attention and care. That evening, as he was preparing dinner, Lily approached him in the kitchen. She stood quietly for a moment, clutching her elephant before speaking. "Mr. Marcus," she said formally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. And you can just call me Marcus, or—" He paused, unsure how to finish that sentence. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "In the alley. You could have just walked away." Marcus knelt down so he was at her eye level. "Do you want the simple answer or the complicated one?" She considered this seriously. Both. The simple answer is because it was the right thing to do. Because you're a little girl who needed help. And I'm a grown-up who was able to help you. What's the complicated answer? Marcus thought for a moment. The complicated answer is that sometimes, when we think our life is hard, the universe shows us someone who has it much harder, and we realize that we have more to give than we thought we did. And sometimes, helping someone else helps us too. Lily nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. Emma said, "You're the best daddy in the world." "Emma's a little biased," Marcus said with a smile. "But I try my best." "I never had a daddy," Lily said matter-of-factly. "But if I did, I would want him to be like you." The simple sincerity of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had to turn away for a moment, pretending to stir the soup on the stove until he could speak again. "Lily," he said carefully, "how would you feel about maybe staying here? With Emma and me, not just for tonight, but for longer?" Her eyes went wide. "Forever, maybe, if that's something you'd want, and if the people who make those decisions think it's a good idea." She was quiet for so long that Marcus worried he'd said too much, moved too fast. But when she finally spoke, her voice was steady, and, "Sure, I would like that very much." That night, as Marcus tucked both girls into bed, Emma made another announcement. "Lily is my sister now," she declared with the authority of a 4-year-old who had decided how the world should work. "Is that okay with you, Lily?" Marcus asked. Lily nodded, smiling shyly. "I always wanted a sister." "Then it's settled," Emma said, reaching down to squeeze Lily's hand. "We're a family now." Lying in his own bed that night, Marcus stared at the ceiling and thought about the strange turns life could take. 24 hours ago, he had been a struggling single father worried about making ends meet and giving his daughter a decent Christmas. Now, he was potentially facing the challenge of raising 2 children, navigating the foster care system, and somehow finding a way to make it all work financially and emotionally. It should have been terrifying. In many ways, it was. But as he listened to the soft sounds of the 2 girls sleeping in the next room, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of completeness, of rightness, of being exactly where he was supposed to be. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be court dates and home studies, financial struggles and emotional challenges. There would be days when he doubted his ability to handle it all, moments when the weight of responsibility would feel overwhelming. But tonight, on this Christmas that had started with a little girl digging through trash and ended with that same girl, safe and loved in a warm bed, surrounded by the family she had never dared to hope for, Marcus Chen knew he had been given the greatest gift of all, the chance to make a difference in a child's life, and in doing so, to discover that his own life had more meaning and capacity for love than he had ever imagined. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new and full of possibility. And in a small apartment where 3 people had become a family in the space of a single day, Christmas had worked its truest magic. It had taken what was broken and made it whole.